Okay, what's up, everyone? I'm back again with another review video, and this time I'm going to be reviewing the Batman with spoilers. But I'm pretty sure it's probably not spoilers for many of you because I'm pretty sure many of you might have watched it already. But here you are, hopefully here you are watching my review video to know what I actually thought about the movie. But once again, yeah, I finally got that golden opportunity to watch watch this movie actually. Ever since even though this movie came out like almost 2 months ago, here I am, reviewing this movie now. So without any further ado, let's begin. And honestly, just one more thing before I start, I have to say, it's been like 10 years ever since Batman got his solo movie because, 10 years ago, there was The Dark Knight Rises. I'm not even talking about Batman versus Superman and the Justice League because that wasn't even a Batman movie. It was more of like, an ensemble movie. Anyways, I digress. I'm just saying that, 10 years later, Batman finally got his solo movie. So let's see what this movie is like. First, let's start off by talking about the main character himself, the Batman, or should I say Batman. So from what I observed, and I'm pretty sure many of you will also agree, because this movie was also inspired from those kind of comic books as well, where he was still a rookie, just learning to be Batman, learning to fight crime, and he was in his second year, I think. He had gotten into his second year as Batman in this movie, and even in the comic books Long Halloween, or not Long Halloween, but Batman Year One, he was also quite new to being Batman, and that was also these were also the comic books, which this movie was inspired by. And I'm gonna first start off by talking about costume design. I don't know what you may think of me talking about costume design, but I'm still gonna talk about it. I think his mask was nice, was well made. I really like those ears, like those small pointy ears. I don't know why I don't know, not I don't know, but I'm sorry if I'm being like going too much into details. But I just for some reason I really liked his mask, and then I just really liked his jawbone, the way it was visible, more visible than previous mask. And also, I have to talk about how his voice was also more clear. Not like, I mean, his voice was still like quite menacing and quite good, but I mean, it was not exactly the most unclear, which is a good thing in a way. You could at least, hear his voice more audible. And of course, also his cape also was well designed. I think I saw his like, the cape also covering his neck as well. And also cape also was useful for other reasons as well, such as help turn into a parachute. That way, he could glide safely, which I'm going to talk about later. And his costume, and also I'm also going to talk about his bat logo. The way the bat logo was stuck to his costume. I think it was pretty cool how his bat logo was not just a logo, but also it came in quite handy for him when it came to like using it as a tool or a weapon. Like for example, when he had to cut ropes, I think it was very handy for him, good for him, I guess. I think from what it looks like, I think you could. I think his bat logo was more or less like a bat rank, I guess. I think the way he was using it as if it were a bat rank. Although I think it might have been made out of pistols. I think from the way it looks like, the way it has been designed. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic. And I think the Batmobile. I have to talk about the Batmobile, how the Batmobile was designed, and especially the Batmobile chase scene. Like, come on, of course I want to talk about that scene. Like, that scene was just epic. The way he was chasing Penguin with the Batmobile, and the way he gets through those trucks, and then like goes through that in the tank full of diesel, on the tank full of kerosene. And like Penguin thinks that he has won, he got him, destroyed him, but actually no big surprise, he comes out through the fire, and then crashes through Penguin's car, and makes Penguin's car like flip over multiple times, which the scene which I'm talking about. I think that scene was very epic, just shows how powerful Batman can actually be, and he's not someone to like really mess around with. I think it was a very powerful scene in my opinion, and also a pretty cool scene as well. And of course, I'm going to talk about his fighting skills, given that Batman, he's very good at fighting. And even in this movie, also, he was very good at fighting. I especially like that scene at the train station where he was fighting against those goons with the white makeup on. I think the way he just like the way he beat up the first goon who tried to attack him, by twisting his arm and punching him multiple times, and then he says, "I'm vengeance." It just clearly like a clear sign that like he is quite powerful, and he's not someone to like again once again mess around with. And I think the fight scenes, all the fight scenes, even though this was my favorite fight scene, I think all the fight scenes were very well choreographed and showed how slick and brutal he is at fighting. Although, once again, because he's a rookie, I think it was clearly visible that he was a rookie at fighting, given that he was still getting beaten up in the middle of fights. And like there are times, when you get pushed away by those thugs he was fighting against, or get even punched as well. So I remember those kind of times would also come up. And then of course I wanted to talk about his gliding skills. I mean the way he was scared of like jumping off the building before the cops could get him. The scene where he was escaping from the police station. I think it was quite clear how he was new to gliding despite having a cape, because like even the way he actually lands quite unsuccessfully because his parachute gets stuck in between the bus and the train track. Okay, I think I'm talking too much. I'll just finish this quickly. I'll move on to the next slide. But then like before he can like land successfully, he just like because the parachute getting stuck, he crashes into a car, then his leg also gets severely, injured. That must have hurt for sure. I'm pretty sure about that. And he was clearly new to all this for sure. Now let's move on to his alter ego. That's none other than Bruce Wayne. And if where do I start? I think this Bruce Wayne was certainly very like emotionless, expressionless, and even like lacked many dialogues as well. He didn't really have much dialogues to make him that engaging. He's always mute, especially that church scene, for example, where he talks to no one. He's just very quiet. He's looking at everyone with this very like somewhat sad face, uninterested face. Like he just seems he almost seemed very uninterested in that event at that event of the church, like where the funeral was taking place. And his hair also was always downwards, always, which made him seem quite emo as well. But I think I wanted to also talk, but I still wanted to talk about his relationship with Alfred. I think it was very different from the relationships we have seen between, let's say, Christian Bale and Michael Caine. It's very unique in that sense. I think they were like quite new to working with each other. Like Bruce, I mean, Alfred has always been his butler, but then like Alfred having to help Bruce as Batman. I think it was clear that this was all new to Alfred, and Alfred was quite concerned of Bruce Wayne getting into all of this. And then there's a scene also in the Batcave, where he explains this to Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is like, you're not my father. I think I really, uh, I think that scene particularly made me quite excited to see them together even more throughout the whole movie and even future movies, because not only this scene, but I think there's also another scene which I want to talk about a bit later, which I think certainly made their relationship very unique and also very interesting in a way. Well, I'm going to talk about that later. But one more thing, I have to say, I wish they could have shown his workout routine a little bit, just so that we could get some idea or to get an idea or two about what he does to get that to have that level of fitness. I know I just put it there just like that. It could have really helped. You know what I'm saying? And now I'm going to talk about the villains. So the Riddler, of course, was the main villain, and I have to first say that his character was quite different. I think there's a very different take on his character in this movie. So he was certainly darker and grittier compared to, let's say, the Jim Carrey Riddler and back in Batman Forever. But his character arc was still quite interesting. I thought it worked because the way his how he stems where he stems from is from the orphanage created by Thomas Wayne. But then because Thomas Wayne wasn't funding for the orphanage, I think that led to like Edward Nashton being Riddler and trying to fight against injustice, but of course, in a morally wrong way. I especially love that scene, between him and Batman at the prison where, he's in the cell and, Batman is interrogating him. Kind of reminds me of the scene between Joker and Batman, where, Batman interrogates Joker in the Dark Knight. But in reality, even though Joker is the one who's captured, the same way in this scene, in this movie, also Riddler was the one who was captured. Technically, Batman was like mentally captured by the villain he was interrogating in both the movies, not just this movie, but Dark Knight. It was very interesting to see how Batman breaks down. He's like, "What have you done? What have you done?" And then, start banging the window. which was in the the window where which Edward Nashton was behind. And that way, just it was very that scene was very satisfying in some sense, because that way we kind of like see the true connection between Riddler and Batman. And that way, the whole story, their whole story comes full circle, because of course even after that scene there's a flooding scene where Batman has to go and fight against all those followers of Riddler. And then you know that's that was a pretty good scene, honestly. But that's all I had to wanted to say about Riddler. I think he was also very menacing at times whenever he would appear in the videos. Albeit sometimes I feel like it was a bit annoying. Whenever he would yell slash laugh, and like he would yell and at the same time he would laugh for some reason. I mean, I get it. It was quite horrifying whenever he would laugh like that, but it would also get very annoying because like sometimes it was very unclear. His messages in his videos were quite unclear. But I have to say his riddlers were amazing. I mean, probably the riddles were his riddles who probably came from the comic books, but the riddles were well written. I especially love that riddle where it's when something like, what does a liar do when he's dead? He lies still. And that's actually true, because literally the liar is actually dead, and has lied down because the liar is dead. I think it's very nice riddle. Actually, that was a very interesting riddle. It got me also thinking for a while as well. I'm just saying. Now moving on to Penguin, I mean, of course he wasn't the main villain, but hope to see more of him in the future. I'm pretty sure they're trying to like set up the Penguin as a main villain for a future Batman movie, because at the end, when Batman is narrating, although I have to say, like I mean, not to digress, but I have to say, one thing I learned from Batman in this movie was journaling his thoughts and journaling his journey as Batman, and where he has reached as Batman. I think I have to really learn how to journal from him, honestly, because when he was journaling, he mentions how you know there will be people who try to grab power, and then the camera, I think, zooms into Penguin. I think that clearly implies that Penguin is probably going to be one of those characters who's trying to grab power, and then eventually become the main villain. Batman has to stop. And another difference I noticed, well, not difference, but I think one, not another difference, but I think a main difference I noticed between Penguin in this movie, probably because this is not, he wasn't the main villain, so they could afford to have him use a gun instead of an umbrella. Maybe in the future we get to see him use an umbrella as a gun. Who knows? And then there's also Catwoman. I know she wasn't exactly a villain. She was more of an anti-hero. I think their relationship was quite interesting. Like it certainly worked. I think I'll be honest, it was probably even better than the relationship between Christian Bale and Anne Hathaway. The relationship between Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson was probably better than that relationship. Especially, sometimes it would like, help cut the tension. For example, there's a scene when, Batman goes to her house and he's like, "You got a lot of cats." I think that was a funny scene, helped cut the tension of from all the darkness throughout this whole movie. Although I have to say, speaking of the movie, I have to say one small complaint I had about this movie was it was quite long. It was 3 hours long, and it was not just that. I think main reason why it was really 3 hours long was probably because it was slow paced. I think there are some scenes which could have like been a lot quicker and could have saved time. Because I remember the Dark Knight movies were never as slow as this movie. This movie was certainly far slower than the Dark Knight movies. Dark Knight movies were certainly more fast paced. So I think they could have also saved time by making scenes more quick compared to making them slower at pace. And finally, I'm also going to talk about the cameo at the end, which was the Joker, and I know how he meets the Riddler, and then he asks him that interesting riddle, which is something like the more something like the less of wait some what was it like the less you have of this, the more worth they are, or the more they are worth. And I think that the answer to that was friends. That's actually true, and I think there's a great message from the riddle, and I think that riddle also implies that they're going to be quite good friends in prison, like that prison being Arkham Asylum. So once they get out, they're probably going to work together and try to like challenge Batman. So we'll see about that. Along with the villains, of course, there are also the supporting characters, Jim Gordon and Alfred Pennyworth in particular. So I think Jim Gordon and Batman, because Batman being new to fighting crime, I think Jim Gordon was certainly getting used to Batman's way of working. There are times when they weren't getting along with each other, and that makes sense because they're still like trying to get used to both of their ways of doing things, both their ways of doing things. I also noticed how he was swearing far more than like the previous Gordons. For example, Oldman's Gordons and Gary Oldman's Gordon. I think Jeffrey Wright's Gordon was swearing like every time he would see something horrifying. But at the same time, I still hope to see more of him because at the end, Batman mentions how he's one of the good cops. So hopefully we get to see him be the good cop more of, get to see him more, see him be the good cop even more in the future Batman movies. And of course, there was also Alfred Pennyworth, played by Andy Serkis. I think I really loved that scene where he was at a hospital, and Bruce Wayne comes to meet him, and then he asks about his father and the truth behind his father, about how good of a person he truly was, and then the way Alfred explains it, really just brought brought them closer together. I think it was well played by Andy Serkis and even Robert Pattinson. That scene, a very emotional and a powerful scene, played perfectly by both these actors. I really, really like this scene, and that's why I want to see more of them in the future Batman movies. And I also wanted to talk about Gotham City. I don't know if this might be a bit random, but for some reason, I really like the design of this Gotham City, probably because it was more futuristic and even more fictional compared to the compared to the Gotham City in the Dark Knight trilogy. And I think that makes sense because the Gotham City in the Dark Knight trilogy, it was nice, but maybe not as visually appealing, mainly because the whole idea was to make it as realistic as possible. So I understand why it may not have been as visually stunning as the Gotham City in the Batman. And that's the main reason why I really liked the design of Gotham City in this movie. So I'm just just putting it out there like that. And let's also talk about the music choices, like something in the way the song, I think it fit perfectly with this movie, given that the tone of this movie is quite dark. And this song, being like combined with the dark tone of this movie was quite perfect. I think it went well with this kind of tone of the movie, with this kind of tone this movie had. For example, I really like the scene, when Bruce Wayne is heading to the Batcave with his bike, and then in the background the song is being played. I think it certainly made me, more excited to see more of Bruce Wayne and also Batman, due to this song being played in the background in that scene. And also the theme song of Batman was also very epic, especially the Batmobile chase scene when he gets out of the Batmobile and then he's heading towards Penguin, and then that theme song gets played like dun, 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 dun. I think it certainly made him seem quite menacing to the supervillains for sure. So I think the music was quite well made in this movie. And finally, here are my final thoughts of the movie. Try to finish this up soon, as soon as possible. So first of all, like I had mentioned, this movie tries to focus on the initial years of Batman being Batman. Also his detective skills, such as when you're solving those riddles, trying to figure out the answer to those riddles. I think some of those riddles were very interesting. They also got me thinking about them as well. So I think that way, his detective skills were brilliantly portrayed, and because he was new to being Batman, he was young as Batman. Therefore, he also had a lot to learn throughout his journey because because he was new to being Batman. Of course, he was going to make more mistakes because he's not very experienced, and because he was going to make more mistakes. He was also going to learn a lot from those mistakes. I think he certainly learned about himself quite a lot by the end of this movie, from what I saw, and therefore I really hope he grows into a better character in the future movies. Given that I'm pretty sure they're going to make a trilogy out of this movie, out of this in particular Batman, which is Robert Pattinson's Batman. So I really think there's a lot of potential there's potential to do a lot with this character of Batman, this character being Batman, and also other characters such as Jim Gordon and Catwoman, and even Alfred Pennyworth in the future Batman movies. So once again, I think there certainly is potential to do a lot with all these characters. So this was all I had for this video. Tell me what you thought about this movie, and also what you thought about my review. Did you think I missed out something important, or I could have mentioned something which was very important about the movie, and but then it completely flew over me or something? Just let me know. And here's a reference, or here's a reference to this movie. So that's all I had for this video. Once again, or I mean, not once again because I didn't even see it, but thanks for watching. See you next time.